All right, so I'm going to quick give you the basics for assembling and welding your BA shredder. So you'll start with your main datum A plate, and you're just going to place all of the supports in here. All right, so once you get them all in, you grab your datum B plate. And I typically try to start over here. I get these three, and then I get this one lined up, then I hold it down, and then I get these two lined up, and it should drop down. So I start here, I get the first one, second one, third one, and I hold down, then I get the bottom one, okay, now I got that one, that one, that one. There you go. All right, so now that you got all these in, you want to, sometimes you'll have a little bit of play here, right? You want to make sure that this pivot is lined up. So, as what I suggest is you take your piece of 1.5 by 1.5 that's going to be used for your multi-axis tracking and tensioning, and you take and you put that right in there and you bolt it down nice and tight. That will line everything, that will square up this part right here. If you don't have this done yet and you really want to get this welded up, you have other options. If you have a welding table like this one, you can shove a dowel pin through there. That dowel's too big. Or you can put your 5/8 bolt through there. And sandwich a piece of 1.5 tube. Or you can stack it full of washers and tighten the other side. Either way, that's going to make sure that this pivot point is actually perpendicular. So I would do that. Either stack washers and put a nut on the other side and squeeze it, or put your piece of 1.5 tubing in there and squeeze it a little bit. And that will clamp this end. And then this end here, really, if this is good, that's about all that matters. The rest of this, you just clamp down. You can use a C-clamp to squeeze it, or you can clamp it down to something solid. Anyways, once you get it clamped down, you're going to alternate your tacks. You're going to tack, 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 tack. Basically, spread the heat out, right? I would try to avoid, tack, 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 tack. Because you're heating the plate all the way across. Where if you tack here and you move here, you've spread it out, and you're slowly warming the whole plate, and you're way less likely to twist things up. And then you flip it over and you do the same thing. Make sure you tack everything and fully assemble everything with tacks to make sure you haven't twisted or shoved something over. Also a good practice, you could always there's plenty of play in there. There shouldn't be any possible way that this ever doesn't fit, but just sanity check it before you fully weld everything, just in case something has twisted. So that's the basics on this portion. All right, so when you get to this point, it's important that you just tack everything together. Small tacks that can be broken or cut. In the event that you got something incorrect, you can easily fix it. Don't fully weld anything until you've attached this part to this part and you've rotated it and that's not binding. Because if you don't get stuff parallel, you could have some binding. So the first thing we're going to do is these nuts, we're going to weld to the inside here and over there. And so the thing about these is we want to make sure they're concentric so that the shoulder bolt can actually, line up. So is what I'm going to do. I have the shoulder bolt that's listed on the bill of materials, and I got a stack of washers. Now you can just put the spacer and your actual part on, but this is easier. Now make sure that the shoulder is sticking through the washer stack, because that's going to align everything. So you put that in there, and now that it's aligned but not sticking through, it's going to pull that nut up against this plate, and it's going to make it concentric, which is the key. So now, I'm doing this with one hand, it's a little bit tough. There you go. Now, if you have coating like chrome or black oxide or any type of coating on these nuts, clean it off before you weld, or make sure you have something to suck those fumes away. Do not breathe in the fumes if you're welding on coated bolts. So just a tip there. I don't want anybody getting sick. One quick note that I want to add is that this hole right there is not the same nut as these two. These two have shoulder bolts, and it's a 3/8/16 nut back here, and this is your locking screw, and so that will be a 1/2 13. But also we will use a bolt to hold that into position when we weld it. Alright, once you have your nuts welded on there, you're going to take this guy right here, your shoulder bolt and your spacer, and you're going to attach it in there, like so. And then you will do the same with this shoulder bolt and a spacer to that side. Both of these attach to the outside of the frame, and then they will go into those 4 slots. Alright, so now that you have this tacked together, you have these guys attached, and this is done, you're going to place that on this and tack it into place. So also, you're going to want to grind down this weld right here if it's raised. That's going to keep things flat. Alright, now that this is fully welded and this is tacked together, we're going to take this and we're going to put it on there. Now, make sure that this flat side is where the tabs are. So when you rotate these, they should line up with the flat side. If it's, yeah. And these two are on the same axis. So if you get one of these flipped around, that's not going to be good. Alright, now that will sit on there by itself. Now the key thing here is you want to make sure this is parallel, right? You want the same gap all the way around right here. This is just a little tip that I like to use to make sure things stay parallel while I'm tacking. I will take the same spacer that I'm using in that joint, and I will put one up here, I'll put one there, and I'll clamp it. If you need to, scoot this one all the way to the edge right here, and there, and clamp a little bit in the middle. Now clamp lightly, don't bend your stuff, but this is going to keep everything parallel while you tack it up. This is really the one that you want equal gap. That matters the most, because if it's not equal gap, it'll tend to bind up a little bit, and you'll have to loosen your clamp handle more than you should to tip. So that's typically how I do that. Now I have a spacer there, and a spacer in between down there. So I'm holding that all together with the clamp. Alright, so now that it's tacked into position, I actually had extra spacers in there, and I had it tight so that way it would hold things in place. Now I can take these out Now it actually sits on the flat top, so and when you weld, if you do weld the insides, make sure your weld is small enough that it does not land on this surface. Same with this one. If you're going to weld on the inside, make sure that it doesn't land on this surface. Just do a small weld. Don't do like a 3/8. You do not need a massive weld to pull that off. But there you go. Tilting action successful. Alright, so quick tip here. To put these in, just get a 1-inch or a short bolt, put in from the bottom, and then you can weld those on there. Also, make sure you smooth these off, at least in this area, because this comes down and touches and locates right here, and that just keeps it vertical. So if you have a big, huge weld right here, instead of vertical, it's going to be off at an angle, right? So just take your weld down flush, at least where my finger is, right there and right there. You don't have to take the whole thing off. I just did for cosmetic reasons. Okay, when you're going to attach your arm here, all you want to do is center that here and give enough room so that way your lock nut and lock washer can actually lock. So basically, just center that up and weld it here. Here, you can weld on the back, but you don't have to. Alright, so when you go to weld this up, this is the process that I suggest that you do. So you go ahead and you mount this guy on your tension arm. You attach the rod end and you attach this. So the goal here is to have a little bit of gap on both sides of the shoulder bolt, and you can do that, you know, when you clamp this by kind of pushing it into position. See, I can push it one way or the other, but I'm going to try to keep it centered in the shoulder bolt. In a perfect world, I'd have even gap on this side and that side, but if you don't have it, you know, perfect, it's going to be okay. Now, as far as the orientation of this, it should fit really well, but if it is a little bit loose, the goal is that this is parallel here and parallel there. So, like I said, if you're off a degree, it's not going to be the end of the world. But I'm kind of particular, so I like my stuff, you know, perfect. But so that's how I do that. I clamp this right here, and you can use just a plain nut, or you can use one of these custom do jobs here, not really sure what that will be, but I'm sure by now you know because it's in the plans. So now I'm going to tack this in position. I'm going to tack it here, here, and here. Or if you don't want it visible, it'd be a little bit harder to get in here, but you can tack here, the underside, and there. Now that's going to be really hard to tack, so honestly, I'm just going to make sure my welds look good, and I'm going to put it on the front. So I'm going to tack it that corner, and there. That's going to keep it from twisting and moving. Then I'll weld it complete. When I go to weld it complete, well, I'm going to TIG it, so I don't have to take all this stuff off. But if you're going to MIG it, take all that stuff off to prevent the splatter from getting in the threads and all that stuff.